All right, guys, we're live. Going to be a super fast, rapid fire one today because it's my daughter's first birthday. So we got a birthday party, and as you can see, I'm a bit scruffy and I got to get myself together. But I wanted to just do a quick one of these because I know it's been a while, and it's probably only going to get harder for me to do it. I've just been dealing with a lot of biz stuff recently, and pretty much like filled up every day on client stuff that by the end of the day you're just like you just don't even really, well, most of the time in the evening I actually have the client stuff. So but even when you don't, it's just a lot. So we're gonna work, but we are gonna do it. We're gonna do it. It's just gonna be little random moments like this where I get a window, because you guys know me. Look, you guys know me, I don't plan very well, or at least I overpromise on this kind of stuff. So I don't want to tell you guys I'm going to do a show and then be like, actually, I can't do a show. So I'm probably going to be more spontaneous about when these things go on, just so I don't have to be breaking my word to you. You guys are expecting something's going to go on, but there's a 50% chance it's not going to happen. All right. So let's go into this first. We got the wine. So the wine, we are doing another Vaccaras Gigondas comparison. Remember, we did Domaine Doria before, Vaccaras Gigondas, but that was a 2014 vintage. So now we have a 2019 and a 2018. Wish I could have got the same year. I couldn't. From the same producer, Pierre Amadieu. I do not know him very well. All I can just simply say is that Gigondas and Vaccaras are number 2 and number 3, respectively, when it comes to the Southern Rhone, which is the area we've been doing recently. Chateauneuf-du-Pape is obviously the best. Chateauneuf-du-Pape usually going to have 13 different grapes in it, up to 13 different grapes, but that's kind of more a gimmick. All the Southern Rhone reds focus on what's called GSM, which is Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre. And then you'll also get, as normal players, Sanso and Carignan, and they all add their own little thing to it. I won't go into that right now. This Vaccaras is, does it say? This is 80% Grenache, 20% Syrah, and the Gigondas is the same. So we have pretty much consistency there, and I have to say that's a pretty common amount. Grenache is the big player. If you're getting more Syrah, you tend to be more like Northern Rhone is Syrah. So, and yeah, most of them do Grenache because it's popular, easy drinking. So let's go into it. Let's check it out real quick. Very good nose. Smells like a very classic Southern Rhone Grenache-based wine. One of the things you always get is that the fruit is always so cooked. It's always so cooked down here because it gets very hot in the room. Tony, cheers, my man. It's great to see you. It's always great to see you. Tony Bruno's got an awesome show. Talks to a lot of the Black Pill crowd. If you guys got to check out his show if you haven't checked it out yet. I go on about every 2 months. It's one of my favorite spots to go on to. So I know I've talked about it before, but in case any new guys here, let's try this. Juicy on the front end. It's always very big. These ones are always very big, but not big in the sense of California. I actually think, California is very, very fruit forward. Grenache doesn't punch it quite like California, or at least the Grenache out in Southern Rhone doesn't punch it quite like in California, where the fruit is really hyper juicy. There's a lot of heat on these. Let's try the Gigondas. Corked. It's corked. Another cork bottle. Tragic. That's cork bad. You know what? I kind of knew when I was taking out the cork because it was all, it didn't, when you took out the Vaccaras, it had the usual where it's super tight, but taking out the Gigondas, I'll try it anyway, but super skunked. Yeah, unfortunate. Might actually take that one back, but I'm not sure if I have the receipt anymore. Anyway, whatever. So, so yeah, where was I here? Let's go into some of these questions. And like I said, it's going to be a short show. So, first question. I've just turned 24, and while I'm really good with attraction and game, I haven't had a serious or exclusive or committed relationship with a girl yet, and that's my goal now. I've had some notches, so I don't care if a girl's had some too. She's had her life. I'll judge her by the same standards I judge myself. What I do care about is that she hasn't had a boyfriend before me. If I'm talking to a girl and find out that she's had an ex, I mentally categorize her into the friend zone or the bang zone. While I may find a girl like this hot, it's hard for me to consider her as a relationship material purely on psychological attraction. She's had relationship experiences I haven't, and we'd be going into the relationship from two different frames of reference about it. Her already having experienced a close committed relationship with a guy and all its milestones, while I'd be experiencing one with a girl for the very first time. My question here is wanting a girl in my age demographic who's a heart virgin like me too much to ask? Will I realistically have to have my first long-term relationship with a girl who's had her past ones? Or is having my first long-term relationship with a high-quality girl who's also not had one before meeting me in the cards for me? So this is a really interesting question because I don't think I've ever got something like this before. Um, Everybody's always focused on, oh, is she a virgin? Is she a virgin? So it's kind of interesting and frankly refreshing to have one that's actually, I don't care if she was not a virgin. Has she had a relationship before? It kind of approaches a similar problem from a different direction. But look, let me be clear about it. I don't know what you're romanticizing or imagining exactly it'll be like for her, having been in a prior relationship, what those milestones will look like. I don't. All right, I'll tackle this in different pieces. So I understand where the question comes from, in the sense that maybe there's even a sort of like frame issue. Like this girl has gone through these. This girl's going to have more experience knowing how to navigate things. I'm going to feel like a fish out of water, and um, and even just beyond that, the fact that the girl is maybe you feel like you're missing out on some magical experiences, and so you want something like that. You want your first relationship to be like kind of like your first time for both of you. This is a fantasy, it's a romanization, and while I do think you're probably asking a lot. And also, what exactly do you mean by first relationship? Are you going to count a relationship that lasted 6 months? Or are you going to only think of ones when they're like 2 plus? Like, there's so many details. Like, I was in a relationship my sophomore year in high school for 3 weeks. I know that you probably wouldn't include that, but I make that point just to say, like, this, it's not about the label, it's about what happened within it. And this is relevant because all these milestones, etc. Um, those relationships ended for a reason. They ended for a reason, and if your relationship is going to go the distance, which would be your intention with a girl, regardless of her past relationship history, the focus is really about your experiences, not trying to like, well, how do I measure up against this other guy? Because that's actually what it sounds like. It sounds like that there's some level of, well, it's her being with me isn't going to be special because she's already done this with another guy before. And every relationship has their own experiences, just like every person in their entire life has their own experiences. And you can't try to control that. That's a scarcity mindset on the deepest level. Um, and I don't actually think it serves you well for the most part, because a girl who's actually had some relationship experience may be mature enough to help guide the two of you through some rough patches, because relationships aren't necessarily easy. Most relationships fail for a reason, and they fail because people don't know what they're doing. So if the two of you don't know what you're doing and you haven't been in relationships, you've never let yourselves get close to someone before, you've just upped the chances dramatically that um, things are gonna fall apart. And also, you know, I know that you've been working on yourself, and um, but the flip side is that if a girl hasn't been in a relationship, she's in her, you know, mid 20s, let's say, even just early 20s, she hasn't been in a relationship. Uh, I don't necessarily think this is the case, but if she's avoiding all that stuff, and uh, it just seems like I wouldn't pick on that kind of criteria, because it's kind of like selecting for uh it's selecting almost for like a lower kind of health in a girl, like that the girl would only hook up and would avoid getting close to guys. um Look, if you meet a girl like that, you guys will understand each other, and that's fine, and you can probably work it out. But I think you're probably in a better position to have somebody who at least has some experience. It don't have to be like, Miss Relationship. This is her, third go around serious guy, together 3 years each time. You don't have to be with a girl like that necessarily, but a girl's been in a relationship before, so what? So what? I would not pick people based off of that. I would pick people based on whether or not you're attracted to them, whether or not you guys have shared values, whether or not you guys click. That's what I would do. Pick it on that. Figure out the rest later, and don't try to control the process. All right. Next question. What's up? Returning follower. Appreciate the answer to the last question. Not that question I just answered. Previous show, I guess. Sometimes the simplest insights are the ones needed. Second question. How does one know the difference between someone seeing them as a backup option and someone coming back to them? Same scenario as girlfriend who leaves boyfriend to explore life and options but claims to love him. Okay, so how does one know the difference between someone seeing them as a backup option and someone coming back to them? Okay, cool. So, okay, I would, it's a really good question actually. I got to think about this before. I got to think about this for a second, because it's very subtle, but it's also very apparent. Like I can pick it up really quickly, but I've never verbalized it. So when a girl is really just trying to get back together with you because she's run out of options, one of the clearest things, okay, this is a really easy sign, really obvious open sign, is that the girl, um, or whatever, the guy also, that they got dumped, that they got broken up with in the situation. Okay, that's a really, really clear sign. If they're the one who's on the back foot, you definitely want to stay away, because the chances of them coming back to you in good faith is probably 1%. Like it's super, super tiny. I don't think I can tell a situation where that's actually really worked. I guess I've heard of situations in a relationship with infidelity where the guy was patient. That's complicated. It basically doesn't work. Basically doesn't work. And even if you were to say it does work, the relationship wouldn't be set in a good foundation. So, so if she left the guy, then you have a much more complicated situation. Okay? Because if she left the guy, then she may have actually learn something about it. So if she left the guy and the guy didn't do anything wrong, the guy was just himself, then it's possible that her coming back to you is there's an element of good faith with it. Like, you know what, this isn't really what I wanted. Um, but honestly, I think a lot of it depends on what was the context in which things ended. What was the context in which things ended? And how is she coming back to you also? You know, when someone comes back to you begging, it's a bad sign, because when someone comes back to you begging, that's an indication of fear and weakness, and that means fear and weakness is motivating their decision to come back to you. So it's not as much about you as it is some sort of fear of being alone or neurosis. If they come back to you and they just are very open and honest and say, "Look, I made a mistake. I don't expect you to take me back. I just wanted to say that I broke up with the guy. I I realized that I would love to see you again, but I understand." To really be much more, um, put yourself out on the table, be vulnerable, but also be very acknowledging. And look, that's your best shot. Even if that's the case, it's not, um, I wouldn't, I would take it. I would, if you would decide to go with it, go into it without overly investing yourself in it, in the sense that, I'm not saying like to have one foot out, but just to be, don't like go head over heels like she's back, she's with me again. Like, you want to be cautious and ease your way back in. Don't just jump back in. Okay, Mr. Saying, what if she makes a decision as a leap of faith? Um, I mean, it's kind of like, that sounds to me, when I hear that, that sounds to me a lot like something didn't work out and her trying to reposition it. But I'd have to know more about specific context with it, because that terminology is usually bullshit. It's usually, I don't want to be alone. Like, it's a leap of faith. I'll just, it's different than somebody saying that, like, I would regret not doing this. I would regret not trying this. Grogu, some of your questions here in the chat. I've never hooked up before. I've never avoided relationships because I was never somebody readily available to have sex. I was only focused on one guy, and he wanted to, and only wanted that one guy, but he didn't want me. If I'm interested in someone and serious, I'll be interested in them. Yeah, and it's true. And Grogu, you're not super common with that, but there are other people like you who do that. I mean, it's not like the rarest thing in the world. And honestly, I think it's pretty healthy. I mean, maybe there's a little bit too much of a protection, but it's healthy to be, um, not to just throw yourself out there with people who don't do anything for you. Where are places you can go meet new people? I don't like church, and I'm not a clubbing or partying person either. Well, you sound like kind of a more artistic girl. Coffee shops. It's getting cold, but parks. Something I would say more in the sort of artistic realm, I think would be fitting for you. Put yourself in a spot where a guy who has the kind of demeanor that you would like would be. So I remember at the cafe I used to go to in New York, there were tons of attractive artsy girls there. And if I had been single, I mean, it would have been easy picking. They just would go there and they'd look at you and everything like that. Like, a lot of times they'd check me out. Sometimes they'd start conversations with me. I was like, I'm writing my next, I wouldn't tell them, but I was like, I'm writing an email for my, my coaching business. It was very funny though. I got so much fodder in 2018 and 2019. Uh, if you check out some of those old emails, so much fodder just sitting in that cafe watching interactions go on. It's easier, obviously, in a big city, but small towns, local cafe shop, some guy's going to come in there. So let's see. Next question here, because I gotta really go through this. Can't be late for my daughter's first birthday. Let's see here. Okay, what's up, champ? Hope you're well. Have an interesting topic you could potentially discuss in a periscope. What are your thoughts on erotic hypnotism? Would this be something you do in a committed relationship? And what are the downsides, since I doubt it's all sunshine and orgasmic rainbows? Anyway, thanks for everything you do, man. Okay, so erotic hypnosis is effective. Let me start by doing that. I think it's important for me to say that erotic hypnosis is effective. It's effective. It works. don't claim it doesn't work. If anybody here is saying it's bullshit, it totally works, 100%. Uh, it is commonly used, and I think more effectively used with girls who are girls who don't know you. And the reason for that is because it's easier to create a fantasy that hypnosis feeds upon when when you're able to allow suggestion, so to speak. Hypnosis is all based on suggestion. So if someone doesn't know you, but you kind of present yourself as this figure, you have people on Twitter like Niels and or maybe I should call him Niles, probably how you say it in the Netherlands. And of course, Commander Alexander, very open about using this stuff. Great effect, crazy sexual experiences with girls. I mean, it really opens up like women who are looking for a crazy sexual experience. It just absolutely amplifies it because you can really make them feel extra, extra, extra surrendered in the whole process. So, but it works. It works especially well with girls who you don't know who are looking for that kind of sexual experience because they're already open to it. They're open to suggestion, and you can present yourself in this fantasy sense, and then they just fall right into it. And so you actually don't have to do as much as you would think. You don't have to do like um I mean, obviously being better at it, you're going to get much better results. But I mean, you can I've used stuff when I was dating, I would use some of it. Absolutely not like an expert at it. Absolutely not an expert, but I would use even just some of it and girls would really go I was like blown away at how much they responded to it. Okay. In a relationship, can it work? Sure. But here's the thing. In The woman has to want it. So if you saw my post, if you haven't checked it out yet, you got to check it out. Probably one of the best things I've written, why your woman stops wanting sex with you. Um, Most recent post on the blog. That post kind of mentions some of this stuff, but in a relationship over time, a woman has to come to choose. Now, you could get into a relationship with a girl, and you could, if you set it off on the right foot from the very beginning, it would be less of an issue to continue with it. Assuming everything else you guys are doing is locked in, then she would probably, she's enjoyed it from the very beginning. You're not going to have too much of a sort of disconnect between who you are and who this mystery persona who's using erotic hypnosis is. But if there has been that kind of collapse, you're going to have to really rebuild it over time. You're going to have to rebuild the trust and rebuild your sort of identity as a man to her. Because if you can't pace her, if she's not looking at you as somebody who is willing to fall into some sort of fantasy about, you're not going to be able to do it. Like, you have to have that frame set from the very beginning. And so if you get that in a relationship and then she wants to have really good sex and she surrenders to that, you guys can do that, but you almost can do it from a higher level because she's like co-participating much more in her submission and surrender. Whereas for a lot of these random girls, they either tend to be young girls who are looking for someone to teach them and to expand their sexuality, or they tend to be older women who are tired of not tapping into it. Phone sex has been a really big outlet for this, and you can see, like, you do just even like some of this stuff back in the day. Was it David? I was gonna say David Spade. It's David Shade. I don't even know if he's still around, but that's the early kind of erotic hypnosis stuff I learned way back, like over a decade ago now. So, Grogu, I don't know why a lot of women are so against submission. I always thought it was a woman's nature to be submissive, and men were built to be leaders. Well, it's the trauma. It's the trauma programming because it's really difficult for women these days to want to do that because it's kind of like it makes them feel more powerless. There's been so much abuse. I don't think women really trust anybody. I don't think men do either. No one trusts anybody because everyone's been abused. I think you heal the abuse and everything starts to repair and get back to its natural state. All right. I got one more here I'm going to hit real quick, and then Camus, I'll quickly answer your question. What's the best way to break up with someone in your opinion? Asking for a friend. I'm just asking generally. Mine always tends to devolve into a push pull game. Well, there's the tactical and strategic things you got to consider. The tactical is how do you want to come across to everybody? If this is like, especially somebody who's exposed to your group, uh, I think you know well, look, there's so many. It's a difficult general question. I think it's good to want to leave on good terms if you can. And I think it's important to try to, yeah, you want to try to leave on good terms if you can. But look, the reality with relationships is that a lot of people don't have the maturity to leave on good terms. So you might do it with you and a girl, and then um, but then maybe she does something or she starts to spread something about you, and then so you have to go and defend your reputation. Now, some people will say you don't have to defend your reputation, but I disagree with that. I disagree with it. I do think that there's a very big context to this, and you can let some people who, if they go off like crazy and your reputation's rock solid and you have the receipts, you don't have to, you can kind of let them destroy themselves. But I do think it's important to set the record straight. So if a girl is going to go and start saying all these things that you did that you didn't do, you might want to beat her to the punch and uh, spread your own stuff, which should be true, obviously, but you will put out your side of the story and make sure your side of the story gets out to the network. Now, I know you're asking more about on a one-on-one basis, but I think it's difficult to separate the one-on-one basis from the social interpretation of it, because that's a lot of what defines a bad breakup is how everybody else around perceives the situation. So the only thing I'll say though is that if you are a little bit too soft and amicable, it's good to do that, to be grateful, to tell them that it's not working for you. Depending on the situation, depending on how much you think the truth would hurt them versus help them, sometimes the truth is painful, but it's good for them. Sometimes it's not good for them. Sometimes it's traumatizing or abusive. You really have to figure out that exact line. So what you would basically do is you have to figure that out in that exact situation, and then you tell the girl, you guys end things. But this is what's really important. Then you really got to cut off contact, because if you have too much of an amicable ending, like, oh, I really appreciate everything, you were so great, blah, blah, blah. Well, very often what happens is you guys kind of get back together, you get pulled back together because you have a tendency to still want to be connected. So I think in every breakup, there needs to be a level of firmness because it is an ending and that needs to be respected. And so if you do have this good ending and you say something like, I wish you the best, block her number afterwards. And that may be like, well, it's really harsh. Why would I do that? It's not personal. You block her number, you block her because you don't want to, you're cutting off the connection. And what a lot of people will do is they'll actually go and get rid of most, if not all, of the things that were connected to that relationship in their life, because it creates an anchor, and that is actually a fact. It creates an energetic anchor. So be really, really cautious about what sort of memorabilia you keep from exes. There was a guy on Twitter. He meant well. I didn't mean to be. Hope I wasn't too rough on him or anything, but he was talking about how he really just couldn't get over his exes and everything like that. But then he wouldn't get rid of the memorabilia. It's like, well, fucking idiot. Well, I want to keep these things as a record of my life. Well, your life is going to be literally the past. There won't be a future. Like, at the very least, get it out, put it in storage. Maybe you check it out when you're 80. But I recommend really getting rid of almost all of it. So, Camus, how can you tell when your girl wants you to call her out versus the guy playing it cool as to not appear too needy invested versus her actually ignoring her? I really don't understand the full question. I think it's phrased a little bit too generally. Um, when a girl wants to call you out, wants you to call her out, I'll just say it like this. People tend to want to call you out, tend to want you to call them out when they keep prodding you. because that's basically them trying to polarize you. And sometimes it may be useful for you to actually go in and go into that, and sometimes you may just want to distance yourself from the whole thing altogether because it's a sign that she's stuck in a dysfunctional pattern. You don't want to be a part of it. But yeah, when a girl is going to test you, she's going to prod you. It's going to be, she's going to do things over and over again to get a reaction. And actually, the best way to break those kind of patterns is to, over top of everything, basically say, what's your intention with this? Why are you doing this? Are you trying to get me to yell at you? Are you trying to get me to do this to you? Are you trying to get me to, so you call out the pattern. Whenever she tries to pull you into a pattern, if you want to break the pattern, you just call it out, because that is neither avoiding her polarity nor is it feeding into it. It's elevating the dialogue. And it's actually diminishing negative polarity, because once something is revealed, you can't fight against something. Like, people fight against mirages. And so if you take away the mirage, then what can they fight against? That's all you're doing. And that's actually leadership on a high level for a man. Um, Grogu, yeah, I think being a believer definitely, that you're raised right. Anyway, guys, I do need to go to my birthday party, my daughter's birthday party. I will see you guys next time. Appreciate you as always. Much love.